So welcome again, everybody, to today's webinar. We'll be discussing different aspects of implementing SAP solutions on AWS, what's supported, the relationship that we have with SAP, where do partners fit, some specific, we'll get pretty technical on some of the specific services that we offer and how we use them in an SAP deployment. There's some general best practices for deploying SAP systems on AWS, so we'll walk through some of those and then give you some idea on where to get some next steps, where to go from there. So if we just go into just a little bit of background on Amazon itself. So this is a simple view of the set of services that we offer here. And at the core of this is the compute, network, storage, and data services that really are the heart of our offering. Now, we then surround these offerings with a wide range of supporting components like management tools, networking services, and application augmentation services. You're probably most familiar with Amazon.com, which is our retail service. Amazon Web Services is really all about providing infrastructure in an on-demand fashion where you can provision and pay for by what you use. And so this is actually highly leveraged for SAP workloads as well, and we'll talk about specifically some of those use cases and customer examples as well. Now our data center footprint is global in nature. We have 9 regions spread across the globe. We span 5 continents with highly redundant data centers in each region here. Now you can think of regions essentially as separate clouds. There's total isolation between these regions. And even what we call the control plane, or where you actually make API calls to instantiate an instance or shut something down, that's also not shared. Now when you as a customer sign up for AWS services, you immediately have access to these resources everywhere, all over the globe. So no longer does IT need to be constrained by infrastructure, right? So you can instantly provision all over the world infrastructure to run your business. And this includes SAP environments. Now, we also have what we call availability zones. And as you see here, we have 25 availability zones. And we refer to an availability zone as basically one or more data centers. And so within a region, you can expect that there are 2 or more availability zones. So then you can do some really interesting things when you architect applications or deploy applications in a region. You can actually deploy an SAP system or environment in multiple data centers and take advantage of the redundancy there. Now, typically with SAP systems, we'll install it in a single data center and use some sort of clustering technology and access hardware to protect the application. Since our data centers are close together and connected with high-speed bandwidth network, you can actually deploy the application across multiple data centers and leverage, again, the redundancy of multiple data centers. Now, we also do something that's very distinct with availability zones. We do as much as possible to remove fault isolation. Now each availability zone is in the same general metro area for latency reasons, obviously. However, they're far enough apart that we share as little as possible. And so insofar as practical, each availability zone has separate power, separate utilities, different network distribution trunks, things of that nature. So again, if you plan for failure and take advantage of being able to architect across multiple availability zones, you can really increase the resiliency of your applications and even SAP applications. Now, since we invest and operate at such high scale, we pay less per unit than most anybody else in the IT industry. And we run our business on a very high volume, low margin basis, which is also really quite unique. So this combination of high scale and low margins allows us to pass significant savings along to you, the customer. And a proof point of this is the 32 price reductions that we've announced over time. Now with traditional infrastructure, you sometimes have to guess capacity, how much capacity you're going to need over the next 3 to 7 years. And specifically with SAP environments, at the beginning of an implementation cycle, you may not have figured out the complete ramification of all the business processes you're implementing. So you may not have a really good idea when you go into the SAP Quick Sizer just how much infrastructure you're going to need. And so oftentimes we find ourselves in situations where we have not enough hardware, or we've purchased extra hardware and we've wasted money. Well, with AWS, you can actually go through the same process. It's good to know where you want to start from a quick sizing perspective. We have the ability to translate the number of SAPs that come out of the quick sizer into specific instance types, and I'll show that later. And you can start with that size, but then if you, for some reason, need extra capacity, you can do two things. You can scale additional application servers on demand and pay for them at that time, or you can actually very easily scale vertically the size of the instance that you've already provisioned. And basically all it requires is you to shut the thing down and start it back up. So again, no longer does the sizing or planning capacity really need to become the burden that it has been in the past. This also goes, for forecasting demand. Obviously, business changes. We have differing things that affect demand, and so sometimes it's also hard to forecast the need that we're going to have for infrastructure. And so using AWS is, again, one reason people are coming with SAP workloads. We actually have a customer named Merrifield. They're a garden center based off the East Coast, and as you can imagine, they have very seasonal demand with garden supply. And they actually leverage the ability to spin up additional dialogue SAP instances when needed during the peak season in the spring, and then they shut those down when they're not needed, and therefore they stop paying for them. So we're pretty excited to see our customers doing some exciting things and some interesting things with the elasticity that we offer. So really, you see where IT becomes removed from being a roadblock, where business consumers come and they need infrastructure to where you can really enable your business. All of the services that we're going to talk about today are self-service, and the other nice thing is that even though we offer a wide variety of services and offerings, you really only pay for what you use. So you don't have to sign up for a package of services in order to get something. If you want to spin up one machine, you can spin up that one machine and pay for that. We'll show you some examples of that in just a moment. Now, at AWS, we're solving problems for big organizations across many verticals and geographies, and we're extremely proud of our customer list, and we're happy to know that we're providing good outcomes and better results for some of the best firms in the world. Now, this also extends into the public sector as well, with many agencies, government agencies, adopting the cloud-first on AWS approach. Now, you might have questions about security in the cloud, but our biggest and most conservative customers have found that we're able to meet their security requirements, and we can often provide a better security profile than what they can deliver internally. Now, our focus and investment in security and the fact that we incorporate requirements from all our most security-conscious customers really benefits even the smallest customer. And so, we have a number of certifications here and white papers that are available on our site. Encourage you to take a look at those. Happy to have the discussion and encourage the discussion around security and our capabilities and options. Now, as this chart here shows, Gartner has categorized AWS in the leader category for infrastructure as a service for 3 years now, with more than 5 times the compute capacity in use than the aggregate total of the other 14 providers in this Magic Quadrant. And AWS is a thought leader. According to Gartner, they're extraordinarily innovative, exceptionally agile, and very responsive to the market. And again, excerpts of these particular reports are also available on our website, and encourage you to take a look at those. So we believe we're providing a lot of value to our customers, and you can use this value as well in SAP environments. Let's talk a little bit about SAP and the alliance that we have with them. They're not only a partner, but a customer as well. They have thousands and thousands of instances running on us on a daily basis. They run us for a myriad of workloads, including development work, test and training, all types of different things. And back in 2008, we started working with them to certify many of their products that you run in your own environments there to be able to be run on our platform here. And we're pleased to say that now all SAP products are certified for production deployment on AWS. This slide here lists a bit about those. So what you know is Business Suite, or your core ERP system, is fully supported on the AWS platform. That includes basically anything that is deployed on a NetWeaver stack, whether it's ABAP or Java. The SAP Business All-in-One, which is basically the same software bits as the Business Suite, but just sold through a different channel, is also supported. All of the rapid deployment solutions you see SAP offering in the marketplace are also supported on our platform. Business Objects, the MDM solution. HANA, there was a recent announcement around HANA, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But HANA, you can now deploy a full production version of HANA on AWS and bring your license to AWS to use that. We'll talk specifically about that in just a moment. The Sybase and Wired platform, Business One, and any recommendations or other parameters around this can be found in SAP Note 165609, and we update that frequently, so I would encourage you to take a look at that from time to time. From a licensing perspective, primarily it's a bring your own license model. So if you were to deploy SAP ECC today or HANA, for the most part you would bring your own license. You'd make the purchase from your SAP sales rep, and then you would bring that license and deploy that software on the AWS platform. There are some differences here, however, so we have an offering called SAP HANA 1 Business Edition, and this is a full-fledged version of HANA. It runs on a 60 gig instance type, so 60 gig of memory, and SAP offers that on our marketplace with a 99 cent per hour license fee. So that's a great way to get an introduction into the HANA ecosystem and to do some proof of concepts. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We have another offering around Business Objects 4.0 with a 5-user and actually multiple user licenses and support offering. One of our partners has put that together, the licensing terms with SAP. So that's also an option if you're interested in deploying Business Objects on AWS. And there's a number of trial or develop editions that are made available on SAP's SCN website. And this is primarily around developer adoption, giving developers the tools and the systems that they need to develop applications. And so you see here, you can use Afaria or process orchestration. There's even a HANA Developer Edition. And recently just made available is also a Sybase ASE Adaptive Server Enterprise Database Developer Edition, which you can also provision from the SCN website. So let's talk a little bit about SAP HANA on AWS, and this actually needs a little updating since we made an announcement at TechEd last week. But if we start, I mentioned the Developer Edition. Now, the Developer Edition, again, can be provisioned from the SCN website. It's meant for development use. It's not intended for productive use. It's really good if you want to get your hands on HANA. The license is free from SAP, and it runs on some of the smaller instance types that we offer. So you don't necessarily need a large cluster compute instance type to run this Developer Edition of HANA. You can log in, you can start modeling data, loading data, and just playing around with HANA. It's very good for doing that. You can even offer training, internal training on this particular Developer Edition. And then there's the Business Edition, which I just mentioned, which is available on the AWS Marketplace. This is meant for both production and non-production deployments. The primary use case here is third-party data marts or other applications that have been developed for HANA that leverage the in-memory technology and the fast query response of HANA. It comes with community support. The really neat thing is this can be up and running in about 10 minutes or so. So after you provision an AWS account, you go into our marketplace and you subscribe to the HANA 1 subscription, the offering, and you can do a one-click deploy and have the system up and running in 10 minutes. There's a premium edition of HANA 1, which is available on the SAP Marketplace. There's an annual subscription that comes with that of about $75K. It does include data services. It also includes enterprise support and support for all HANA-based workloads. And then not on the slide, but just released at TechEd last week in Las Vegas, is the ability for you now to bring your own license. So if you have HANA licenses that you've already purchased, you can actually go to the SAP Marketplace, saphana.com, click on Marketplace, and you'll see an infrastructure services offering there from AWS, and you can actually provision now a 244 gig instance that is fully supported for all HANA-based workloads. and have that up and running in about 15 minutes. Now, furthermore, you can actually, if you want to, you can scale out up to 5 nodes, so we can now support HANA workloads up to 1.22 terabytes. And again, that's all fully automated. That provisioning process for even the scale-out installation takes about 25 minutes for the whole installation. And we're pretty excited about that. We're seeing a lot of interest and would welcome feedback. So let's talk a little bit about some of the use cases that we're seeing people use SAP on AWS for. So customers and partners alike use AWS for SAP environments. They can extend their existing IT infrastructure, the on-premise data center, into the cloud using our technology called Virtual Private Cloud. We see a lot of people running SAP test, dev, demo environments. There's many data archiving solutions archived directly to S3 from SAP. There's also the use here of using AWS for temporary infrastructure for upgrades and operating system and database migrations. Now, many of you might have legacy SAP environments on-premise, and you may be maintaining older hardware with costly maintenance cycles or maintenance contracts. We see customers actually move those to AWS and then shut them down and then start them up only when they need to run a report or get some information for an audit. Thereby, they're able to take advantage of only paying for that environment when they actually need to use it. That's an interesting use case that we're seeing a lot of interest in. Another really interesting use case that is quite popular on AWS is for DR. So typically, DR is fairly costly for an SAP environment. SAP environments are quite complex and require a lot of excess hardware for a disaster recovery site. Now, this hardware can be repurposed oftentimes for maybe dev or QA or other workloads. However, in the event of a DR, you'd have to shut those other environments down. So then you lose those environments, at least temporarily. So what we're seeing is people stand up in a full complement of their SAP environment on AWS, but they shut most of it down all the time. So it's configured and it's ready to run, but the only thing that's typically running in a DR environment on AWS is just the target database or the secondary database. So a customer will set up a replication between their primary SAP databases and the secondary databases on AWS and keep those in sync using, say, log shipping if it's Oracle. And then in the event of a DR, they just cut over and spin up the application tier. So it's very cost effective. There's many additional advantages. Being able to create, now you've got a copy of production on the AWS platform. You can create additional QA environments off of that very easily and enable your business for various workloads. There's a number of case studies for this specific case study or use case, DR, on our site, aws.amazon.com/SAP, and I would encourage you to take a look at that. One of those is this case. Another one would be Galata Chemicals. Encourage you to look at that. And we have other customers who are hosting their complete SAP environment, including production, on AWS. We had an interesting customer probably just about a month ago, worked with them. They were having performance issues in their CRM environment on-premise. It was running on AS400, and we worked with them to actually migrate that to the AWS platform, and now they're running production live on AWS, and they're quite pleased with performance. Now, from an architecture view, this is just an example of the hybrid deployment. Now, customers are going to find you're going to find yourselves all along this continuum of hybrid, right? To researching cloud for what do we want to do, what would we put out there, to already have made some investments there, we're already running some workloads there. To some customers, again, are all in, and this depicts this notion again of virtual private cloud, where this becomes just an extension of your data center, and so you can run dev or QA or training environments on the AWS side and run production on premise. And then as you become more comfortable, you continue to move more workloads. And this is typically what we see. And this here is an example of a customer who is running all of their SAP workloads on AWS with direct connectivity or VPN tunnel from on-premise from your customer location. Now, just real quickly, Amazon sponsored a study by IDC where they interviewed a group of customers to get a sense of results they get from using AWS. And these results were quite favorable, with the aggregate numbers showing significant cost savings combined with better results in terms of reduced downtime. And we're proud really to be delivering both of these benefits simultaneously. And we're happy that we're not sacrificing quality to reduce costs, and we're most proud that our customers can demonstrate both of these benefits. I encourage you to read this report. The other report that's on the far right of the slide was an independent study done by a company called VMS, and this was specific to SAP environments. What is the TCO of running an SAP environment on AWS? And this also came out quite favorably. In fact, the numbers were very similar, around 70-71% cost savings when it comes to infrastructure for SAP environments. So again, this is on our website. I encourage you to go out, read it in depth, try to understand just where the cost savings for you may be. So let's dive into maybe a simple example. This is just a sample test demo system that I put together. Includes one single instance, we call them, or a virtual machine, we call them instances. It's very small. It's got 4 cores and 15 gig of RAM. Should be very sufficient for a training environment. Let's say that we're running it from 8 to 8, so about 240 hours per month. Remember, we're only paying for the time that this system is up. We're going to use about 200 gig. It's a smaller training environment, and we're going to want to keep it backed up for sure. And as you look at the cost breakdown, it comes out to a monthly cost of about $198. So where typically on-premise, where you would have a training environment that may or may not be used all the time, but you've invested in the hardware and it's going to be running all the time. On AWS, you can shut that hardware down when you're not using it and stop paying for that. So it becomes a very cost-effective manner in which to run some of these on-demand environments. Let's talk a little bit about where partners fit with AWS. Now, partners are very key to your success on AWS, and you can use them for a variety of services. Now, it may be that in-house you've got you're fully staffed with your basis team, your functional teams, and they've got some experience already with AWS, and that's great. And you can do that. If you need some augmentation services, we have partners that can help with implementation services or doing POCs. They can come in and do some training, help you set up any of these use cases or scenarios that I talked about, maybe doing disaster recovery, or maybe you just need help getting started. So we're happy to hook you up with any number of these partners, but just know that they're available. They're also listed on our website. So again, if you go to the aws.amazon.com/SAP site, we've listed a number of partners that are SAP savvy when it comes to AWS. So let's talk a little bit about the delineation between what it is that AWS provides and where the partner may fit and where the customer may fit. So at the bottom here you see in orange the infrastructure. So AWS provide the facility and all the compute, the servers, the storage, all the security around that, and then the hypervisor layer, the virtualization layer. And then at this point we hand over the responsibility to you, the customer, to do basically what you're used to doing today, which would be the OS administration, all the backup and patching, network security. So we give you complete control of your environment from the operating system on up. Now you can choose to do all that yourselves, or you can leverage a partner to do some of that for you, and that's completely customizable by you. And this is just another look at it. So again, AWS manages the physical infrastructure up to the hypervisor layer, and then the customer or a partner that you may choose can manage the operating system, the basis layer, or even up into the SAP application, depending on what your requirements are. But again, you may have a fully staffed team to, 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 we recognize that. So let's talk specifically, we'll go a little bit into the technical layer of some of the services that we offer for SAP. So we'll talk first about compute. Now we have today 18 different virtual machine sizes available, and some of these are well equipped for SAP environments, and others we probably wouldn't use for SAP, and we'll discuss which ones those are. Again, these are pay-per-use, they're on demand. Again, you pay for what you're using by the hour. There's no upfront cost or long-term commitments. We offer out-of-the-box monitoring, scaling, and load balancing services. For some of the offerings, like HANA, you can do rapid provisioning. Again, I mentioned with HANA 1 and even the Bring Your Own License version of HANA, you can have one of those systems up and running within 15 minutes. So it's very easy to get started, and you no longer necessarily have to wait for your procuring infrastructure. Now these are some of the virtual machines, or what we call instances, that are typically used by customers for SAP environments. You can see that we have instances anywhere from 4 cores and 15 gig of RAM, all the way up to a very large cluster compute instance with 16 cores. It's actually hyper-threaded, so the operating system would see 32 cores and 244 gig of RAM. And that last instance type is actually what we're leveraging for HANA. As you all know, HANA leverages a lot of memory. So we leverage this for HANA, and it performs quite well. When it comes to, we talked a little bit about sizing early on. When it comes to sizing and working through the quick sizer and the SAPS ratings that you get out of that exercise, these are some of the benchmarks that we did, and we've basically taken those ratings and applied those to these various instance types. So for the high memory 2 extra large instance you see, or what we call the M2 2 extra large, you could equate that to about 3,700 SAPs. So depending on your needs, you could start with that and then scale up from there. When we talk about very large SAP environments, the scale out, we did a 3-tier benchmark with one of our cluster compute instance types, the CC2 8 extra large. You can see that for a single SAP environment, we can actually support up to 90,000 SAPs. So that's quite a large number. And we see people doing that today, deploying large instances of SAP on our platform today. We have a smaller SD benchmark that is just being completed on the M2 4 extra large, and we expect that to be released shortly. And that will allow basically a lower cost option for scale out, if you like, and that should come in with a nice high SAPS ratings as well. So I'd look for that in the SAP note I mentioned earlier. Now, when it comes to operating systems and databases, we are an x86, x64 platform. So we're Windows or Linux-based. SUSE, Red Hat, or Microsoft Windows 2008 R2 or higher are supported. So you can use, say, Windows 2012 and take advantage of some of those features. One of the specific features around Windows and SQL Server 2012 that we see being used heavily are the ability to use SQL Server always-on availability groups. There's actually a really good reference implementation on that. And so this can be used for high availability for an SAP environment. And that's available also on our website. We'd encourage you, if you're running or looking to run an SAP system based on Microsoft or SQL Server, to take a look at that. And then you see the databases here that are also supported, basically the whole gamut from IBM DB2 all the way through Sybase ASE. Let's talk a little bit about storage options on the AWS platform. Now, local to each virtual machine that you're running, so there's obviously physical hardware where this virtual machine is running. There is storage provided on that local physical host, and we call this instance storage. Now, this instance storage is actually temporary in nature because if you were to shut down the virtual machine and start it back up, there's a very good possibility you're going to end up on a different physical host. So while this is actually really good for high-performance computing and other workloads such as EMR, it could become a problem if you stored your SAP database on the local instance store. So we recommend for SAP use cases that you potentially use it for swap space or temporary database storage. The I/O to the local storage is much faster than you would get with standard EBS volumes. However, with provisioned EBS, which I'll talk about in just a moment, it's actually quite performant as well. So again, for the local instance store, be careful what you store here, because when you move your virtual machine, there's a very likelihood that what's stored on the instance store is going to be gone. So that brings us to the Elastic Block Store. Now, Elastic Block Store, EBS, is our persistent block level storage solution that you can basically provision with alongside an EC2 instance. Now, you can provision anywhere from 1 gigabyte volume up to 1 terabyte volume. And keep in mind that multiple volumes can be attached to the same instance, so you can actually attach multiple terabytes. We've seen very large systems on a single virtual machine. There's two different types I alluded to of EBS storage. One is standard. This is the most cost-effective storage, and it delivers approximately 100 IOPS per volume on average. There is a better performance than that, but it's on a best effort basis. Typically, we'll see this used in non-productive environments, again, on-demand environments that are not always on, or they don't have as many users in them. For production environments, we definitely recommend what we call provisioned IOPS. And this is a different solution designed to deliver predictable high performance. Now, we can actually support up to 4,000 IOPS today per volume. And at volume provisioning time, you can actually basically dial in the number of IOPS you want. So let's say you had a production environment that required 16,000 IOPS. You could actually provision 4,000 IOPS volumes. Let's go back to the SQL Server example. SQL Server actually stripes I/O across volumes very well itself. So you would attach 4 volumes to your Windows instance, spread your data files across those 4 volumes, and allow SQL Server to leverage those. And in effect, you're getting the 16,000 IOPS. So that's what we're seeing today, and customers are quite happy with that. When it comes to backups or archival storage, we have a solution called Simple Storage Service, or S3. It's very highly redundant. You can see it has 11 nines of durability and 4 nines of availability. Typically, we'll see customers back their systems up in a number of ways. You can back it up to a local EBS volume, as just mentioned, attach a volume specifically for backup purposes, and then use what we call a snapshot function. And that will actually, those snapshots actually do get installed or stored in S3. Or you can actually push the backup directly to S3. Oracle, RMAN is a good example. There's a plugin that's available that allows you to back up directly from SAP to the SAP Tools backend using RMAN directly to S3. So again, it's very highly redundant. And the reason for that is that once an object or a file is stored in S3, it actually gets copied to all the other availability zones within a region. So even if you were to have a full disaster from a data center perspective, you could recover your data in another data center, because we've taken care of making that data available in all availability zones within a particular region. So something to keep in mind for sure. And lastly, we have this offering called Amazon Glacier. This is a very low-cost storage service that is meant to be used for cold storage, right? So if you have backups that you want to hang on to, say, for a year or half a year, you could actually move the backup from S3. You could target it for Glacier, and now the cost actually goes down from about 10 cents per gig per month down to a penny per gig per month. So it's very cost-effective. It's meant for, again, backups that you're not, or objects or files that you're not frequently accessing, but you want to keep around just in case you need them. It's definitely long-term. Let's talk a little bit about our AWS Import-Export service. So SAP environments sometimes can be very large, so getting the initial environment into AWS is something to consider on how to do that. And you could transfer it over the wire. It could take some time. We do have this service called AWS Import-Export, and this allows you to basically transfer, put files on a removable media device, and then transfer that, or basically ship that to us. We'll take that data, we'll put that into an S3 bucket, the storage service I just mentioned, make that available to you into your account, and then you can use that from there to rebuild your SAP system. Some people are using it for migration of SAP systems, just like I've mentioned. Some are using it just for offsite backup storage. Others are using it in very ingenious ways for disaster recovery. Let's move into some of the networking options here. So I mentioned the virtual private cloud. This is basically a private isolated section from a networking perspective of the AWS Cloud. We give you the ability to basically control access completely to that. You get to define the CIDR range that you want to use in this virtual private cloud. You have the ability to set up multiple subnets, again define the IP address ranges there. All the network access control lists are fully controlled by you, as well as all the virtual firewalls and things of that nature. And typically we're seeing this used for all of the SAP workloads. There are kind of one-off training instances or demo environments that are being used outside of VPC, but we do recommend the virtual private cloud for your SAP environments. There are some connectivity options, a couple different connectivity options for VPC. One is just a standard VPN connection. So you would create basically a hardware VPN tunnel between your router and our routers. This is an encrypted tunnel. It allows you to basically extend your data center into the VPC. It's very easy to set up. We offer some wizards in our console that allow you to basically download the configuration for your particular router on premise. You can take those scripts and then apply them to your router, those commands, and build the tunnel very quickly. We also have another offering called AWS Direct Connect, which basically is the ability for you to provision a direct dedicated line through a telco provider of your choice into a third-party data center that's basically across the street from one of ours. And then we offer basically a cross-connect into our data center by way of in increments of 1 gig or 10 gig. So if you need a 40 gig connection from on-premise into our data center, that's obviously something we can provide or support. Another service that we offer is something called CloudFormation. There's no cost with CloudFormation, but this just basically provides a framework whereby you can provision and manage a group of resources. So let's say you wanted to completely automate the setup of your virtual private cloud, your subnets, and deploy an SAP environment. And this is exactly what we're doing with the Bring Your Own License version of HANA on SAP's Marketplace. When you go through the provisioning process, this launches you into a CloudFormation template, what we call, and it deploys in an automated way an entire VPC, all the subnets. It creates the HANA instance for you, again in a fully automated way, and does it in 15 minutes. And it does it predictably time and time again. So this is something you can do. Let's say you had a DR environment you wanted to stand up in an automated way, or a training environment that comprised maybe 2 or 3 different SAP applications. This is definitely something you can do very easily with CloudFormation. And then lastly, one of the services I wanted to talk about is our VM Import Export service. So let's say you've already taken the step where you virtualized a lot of your SAP environments. You can actually take those virtual machine images, whether they're VMware or Citrix Zen or Hyper-V images, and you can import those into the AWS platform. That's a very easy way to get your SAP environment into us. I mentioned a number of offerings that are available on our AWS Marketplace. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you can go, again, try HANA 1 or the Afari trial. There's business objects as well out here. So let's talk really quickly about some planning best practices, some things that we've learned along the way. So when it comes to deployment options, you've got basically a couple different options. You can use a pre-built SAP image, like I mentioned previously with the HANA Bring Your Own License edition, or HANA 1, or the Business Object editions available on our Marketplace. There's a number of pre-built SAP images that either we or SAP or other partners can provide. Or you can do an SAP installation on your own. So you would basically stand up a base virtual machine, whether it be Windows or Linux. You would download the software from SAP. Now, I recommend downloading the software directly from the Service Marketplace to the EC2 instance that you have provisioned. And the reason for this is that we have very large network pipes coming into our data centers, and so it's a very quick download, and it saves you having to download the software locally on premise and then back up to Amazon. So in essence, doing it twice. So again, the deployment installation procedure is exactly the same as what you would follow on premise. You would follow the same guides. We have a number of guides that are available that I'll show you at the end of the presentation that talk about how to interact with the AWS services. But when it comes to actually installing the SAP software components, it's the exact same software installation. I mentioned downloading the SAP software directly from Service Marketplace. One thing we do see customers do is they'll maintain an EBS volume that is just a repo of the software they've downloaded. And then when they do a new SAP system implementation, they can actually just create a copy of this or mount this EBS volume to this new instance and reuse that download, so you don't have to have download software everywhere. When it comes to using SAP Inst and Download Manager, now SAP Inst requires an X-like environment. Now Windows, that's not a problem. On Linux, I would recommend that there's a couple options you can use. Options like No Machine or Xming. It's easiest if you have, say, a Windows environment stood up next to the Linux instance where you can export your X-Display to run locally on the AWS platform. It becomes a difficult installation process if you're trying to run SAP Inst across a WAN link. It becomes a very slow process, so that's just something we've learned. Let's talk about specifics around SAP Support and Monitoring. So we offer the service called CloudWatch, which gives you lots of detailed metrics on CPU utilization, EBS performance, so storage performance. And we offer that in 1 minute and 5 minute increments. And SAP requires that customers running productive instances on AWS implement the 1 minute intervals. And the reason for that is we built actually what's called the AWS Data Provider for SAP. And this takes information from a number of different areas that are available on AWS. So one is CloudWatch, one is a service that is available from within each virtual machine. Basically tells you can make API calls or calls to it to find out information about yourself. What's my instance ID? How much memory do I have? How many cores do I have? Those types of things. And this data provider that we build actually takes all this information from all these different places and services it to SAP's monitoring agent called SAP OS Call. So the standard performance monitoring transactions that you would use in SAP for troubleshooting performance issues have this enhanced data already if you're running the AWS data provider for SAP. And it needs the 1 minute intervals to function correctly. And so I mentioned it gathers information from a number of different areas, so CloudWatch, EC2 APIs, and what we call a metadata service, which is the service that's available from within the virtual machine. And you can take a look at the installation guide. It's downloadable here at the link I provided. But there are a couple specific things that are required to operate the data provider for SAP. The data provider needs the ability to make calls to CloudWatch to read CloudWatch metrics. So we have what's called an IAM role. Now an IAM role is the ability for you to define very granular permissions and assign them to a virtual machine at launch time. So for instance, the statement here, which is basic JSON, is allowing the instance that I attach this role to describe itself, so describe instances or EBS volumes. That's also allowing read access to CloudWatch metrics. And this is basically all that's required from a permissions perspective, so it's very granular. There's not any security concerns here. And this can be done very easily and should be done at launch time when you launch your instance. Again, more information is in the installation guide. The other thing the data provider needs is connectivity to the internet. Now, this can be accomplished one of two ways. One is via to the internet through an NAT instance through the internet gateway, which is part of the setup process in a VPC. However, if you don't want external access to the internet through an internet gateway, you can actually provide access to the internet through the VPN tunnel you've created to your data center and not through your own proxy servers. And we see customers doing that as well. We'll spend a lot of time on this. We talked about sizing. So sizing again, please use the quick sizer, get the SAPS ratings, and then go to this note 165.6099 to get the SAPS ratings, or just review this presentation where we mentioned those before. One thing that you'll want to consider is default host names in AWS instances. The default is to generate a new host name at the time an instance is launched or restarted. So this needs to be disabled, and I've provided the steps here. Obviously, typically SAP environments, you'll name it something distinct and unique, and you'll want that to remain static. And so you'll want to disable this default behavior. Hardware keys. Hardware key generation is determined. So the hardware ID that SAP uses to determine the license key is retrieved from an internal Amazon service. And this authenticity is checked using a signature that's also retrieved from there. And so there's a specific patch level that's built into the SAP kernel that's required for this functionality to work. Otherwise, if you stop your SAP instance, your virtual machine, and restart it, you're going to end up potentially on another physical host, and you might have to reapply a hardware license or another license. So it's important. If you take a look at this note, we list out the kernel levels. Anybody running a recent kernel or even a moderately recent kernel is going to have this functionality already built in. From an I/O performance perspective, we mentioned the two various EBS offerings, standard and provisioned IOPS. If you need a lot of I/O performance, we recommend using what we call EBS optimized instances. And this basically gives you additional network bandwidth to the EBS volumes in order to support that extra I/O. Now, cluster instances, cluster compute instances have a large pipe to EBS. They have very high I/O performance. So again, if you need a lot of I/O throughput for your SAP environment, would recommend a cluster compute instance type for that. I already mentioned previously, example around using EBS provisioned IOP volumes and striping with SQL Server. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just realize that you can provision multiple volumes to an instance and then use either a RAID 0 configuration or let the database do the striping for performance reasons. Now keep in mind that even if you use a RAID 0, so an unprotected RAID array or software RAID array on a virtual machine, on the back end, AWS, we are basically mirroring each EBS volume, so you're protected from a data perspective there. We talked a little already about migrating existing systems. High-level steps for a larger system, you can create an export using the software provisioning manager. The SAP provides the tooling. Take the output of those files, put them on a removable media, ship those to us. We'll put those in S3 for you. Then on the target side, you'll use, again, the software provisioning manager to install your SAP system using those export files. Now, so the export import is one option. The other option is to do a network copy, depending, again, on the size of the system. For systems less than a terabyte, you could use the network. You can also use, there are a number of options available for parallelizing the transfer. One of the open source and freely available options there is called Tsunami UDP. In a simple test that I did transferring about 30 gig of data from one of our data centers in Virginia all the way down to Brazil, I was able to copy about 30 gig of data in about 30 minutes. That's about a gig a minute. So again, Tsunami UDP works quite well for parallelizing data transfer. Lastly, I know we're running out of time. We'll talk about the support connectivity to AWS. So let's say you've deployed an SAP system on AWS. How would SAP get in to perform troubleshooting if I needed them to do so? So I have a couple diagrams here, and this one here depicts, again, most of the SAP or resources deployed on the AWS platform. What you have here is you've got a SAP router that's been deployed into a public subnet, but that's within a VPC. It's been assigned an elastic IP address, so it's reachable by the internet. However, the security group has only been open to allow traffic from SAP's SAP router on their end. And you're using the SAP connection method SNC. So when you go to look at the support connectivity options, there's a number of options. You'll want to pick SNC for that. From there, the other SAP security groups, the security groups that surround the other SAP systems, you have them trust the security group that the SAP router is maintained in, and SAP can now get to your SAP systems. And you can freely add and remove these firewall rules to allow connectivity at will. It doesn't have to be on all the time. You can even shut down the SAP router server if it's not needed all the time. Now let's say you have you already have a connection to SAP on premise, and you just want to extend that to AWS. That's very easy. Basically, all you have to do is maintain configuration in the SAP Route tab of the SAP router on premise for the AWS instances on our platform. Now, keep in mind also the security group that the SAP systems are leveraging on the AWS side need to include the IP address and the ports you want to open for the SAP router on your on-premise installation. Now, all this is documented in an implementation and operation guide on our site. You can take a look at that. Lastly, when it comes to backup and recovery of systems on AWS, there's a number of options. You can create EBS snapshots or backup directly to S3 like I've talked about. There's the RMAN option with this OSB module that allows for direct to S3 backups. So where to go from here? There's a number of AWS resources, white papers, customer stories that you can take a look at on this microsite here, aws.amazon.com/SAP. And we have a number of other events coming up. Thursday, December 5th, we have some other webinars. We were just at TechEd in Las Vegas. We'll be there in Amsterdam. And then we have our own reInvent conference in Las Vegas. Encourage you to meet us there.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. In your browser, you can see a Q&A window. Please submit questions for our presenters at this time. While we are preparing for the Q&A, if the audience would please take a moment to respond to 2 quick survey questions. The first question, please rate the usefulness of today's webinar. Please take a moment and hit submit. Okay. The second question is, how was the technical quality of today's presentation? Okay, thank you. Your feedback is appreciated and will help us always better improve our webinar platform. So we will now answer some of the questions.
All right, so here's a question. If I were to buy a HANA license today from SAP, how long would it take to deploy that solution on AWS? So that's a really good question. Yeah, so the recently announced Bring Your Own License version of HANA, you would basically buy the license from your SAP support rep, and then you could go directly to the SAP Marketplace on saphana.com and walk through the provisioning process. Now, the provisioning process itself takes about 15 minutes for a single node, so 244 gig HANA instance. It's fully installed, all the tooling you need. It's deployed into a VPC, so we create the VPC We also create an RDP instance to get you access into that, so it's done in a secure manner. And there's also an NAT instance in case the HANA instance needs outbound direct connectivity to the internet for, say, support patches and things of that nature. So, yeah, again, it takes about 15 minutes. If you have you want to deploy up to the terabyte or 1.22 terabytes, it takes about another 10 minutes for each, not for each, but for the other worker nodes. So about 25 minutes in total. Question here, how much memory does HANA support? So again, a single node, 244 gig for the Bring Your Own License edition, all the way up to scale out 5 nodes, 1.22 terabytes. There's a question here, how many SAPs will one EC2 instance support? So again, the M2 extra large supports 3,700 SAPs. The M2 extra large provides 7,400 SAPs, and then if you scale out using the CC2 8 extra large instance types, you can actually get up to 90,000 SAPs. Now, one CC2 instance can provide about 22,000 SAPs on its own. There's a question about RMAN. There are AWS documents, so there is an HA guide that's available on the microsite I have listed here that talks about various options for DataGuard. It's very easy to set up DataGuard on AWS, and is a good solution if you want high availability between data centers or availability zones, or even cross-region replication. There's lots of questions about Bring Your Own License edition of HANA on AWS. I'm hoping that we covered those. If not, there's a bunch of documentation available on the saphana.com site. We're actually working to stand up our own site on this, so please check our site soon. That's a good question. So there's a question here on if you have multiple provisioned IOPS EBS volumes, how do you snapshot those on AWS with the SAP supported databases? So there's a number of different ways to do this. One would be, an easy method would be to back up to a separate EBS volume, a single EBS volume, as long as you can fit within that 1 terabyte size, and then snapshot that into S3. Another option is to, if you're using a volume group manager like LVM2 that supports suspending of IOs, you can do that and then take the snapshots. Keep in mind there that you're going to want to, as you create the snapshots, you're going to want to tag them so you know which snapshots are part of which RAID 0 array. So when you go back to reconstruct that, you can.